have Brandon Runyon from America, who's got up nice and early to do a talk. So we appreciate you coming on to do that talk for us, Brandon. And yeah, I'll let you take it away. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm going to try and be awake and alert for everybody. But yeah, like you said, we're going over pest control in the U.S., some differences, and then some, you know, things I've gotten up to over here. So we'll go ahead and get this started. All right, can everybody see that front page there? Okay. So what we have going on here, basically, I am from the Midwest. So that's going to put me right in middle there, right in Indiana. I'm out of Evansville. I got to live myself. I am a board certified entomologist. Did my undergrad at Purdue, which is in West Lafayette. Went back and got an MBA for some reason, and then went and got a master's in entomology from Nebraska. Second generation PCO. So you guys who had to deal with that, you know how it is with your dad over your shoulder saying, gotta do it this way. I know a lot of fun stuff. If you ever need to get a hold of me, QR code right there. All my information's there. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So just to give you guys kind of a comparison of where I'm at, where we're working at is so in that red circle there is Evansville, and we operate at about an hour out from Evansville, an hour out from Owensboro, which is our office in Kentucky. And just to give you guys kind of a breakdown population wise, and I'm going to go ahead and apologize here if my Midwestern English doesn't match your guys' English, and I butcher some of the pronunciations of your locations here. But Evansville, roughly in size of Cardiff, and Owensboro is roughly the size of Cheltenham, or I'll just let you guys read that one so I don't butcher it. Yeah, we operate in Indiana, Illinois, and Kentucky. And so we get a good mix of urban, suburban, rural, factory, all that stuff. And I'm going to show you guys some of the more interesting places we highlight our retreat, highlight those. And I'll slow down once we get past some of the boring stuff here. That way I can go in my antics. And I apologize for this. I talk with my hands a lot. But yeah, I tried to do that roughly to show you guys, size of what we're working with. But yeah, like I said, hour out of here. And I also wanted to throw in kind of a little weather comparison so you guys get a real, uh, idea of what kind of environment we're working with over here. So when we're at our lows in our winter, we get down to about -4 degrees Celsius. And when we're down that low, we're not operating. But when we do have our winter service, we basically stop with our tank services. We switch over to a granular. We are just treating the entryways. We still here do interior, exterior, mainly on a quarterly basis. We do have some people do every other month outside. That changes things depending on the weather. Our highs get to about 31.6. I didn't do the math this morning, but when I woke up this morning about 3 a.m. my time, it was about 77 degrees. So felt pretty good. We averaged about 13.8. And last January, we got down to a -15.5 for our lowest low, which was real fun. My daughter's 5, and so we had snow that day. She was out there, doing it, but it lasted about 20 minutes before she was all bundled up and said, "I don't want to do this anymore." And threw her hands up. Great. In our highs in August, so about 38.3. We're slowly going to start getting into our really hot weather. So our technicians that we have out in the field, sunscreen, water, cooling towels, whole 9 yards. And our relative humidity in our summer sits about 79%, just to give you guys kind of a feel of what our guys are in the field work with. And then thankfully, I don't have to be on the field too much. I'm mainly the guy that comes out if something goes wrong, or if we have to go up somewhere, in somewhere, or under something, which we'll get into that a little bit. But I wanted to focus on the regulations you guys are doing, because I went through and looked at your guys' BPCA stuff compared to our NPMA and everything. And the only thing I can really say about the US is the US is like 50 different critters in a trench coat pretending to be one entity. So we have different laws and regulations dependent on the state we're operating in. Now, the first three up there were Indiana in the red at the top, next to Illinois in the yellow, Kentucky in the green. That's my operating area. I'm going to throw in Florida here just to highlight the differences we deal with. But every state has its own laws and regulations, and everything changes depending on the state line. So we're going to start with Indiana. It's one I operate the most with, and we operate under the state care. That's going to change. Your regulatory body is going to change depending on your state. Now, a lot of them do have just, Department of Agriculture, which is under a slightly different name. And it kind of all just changes on who you deal with where. So Indiana, the state chemist, puts us under the land grant colleges. Purdue is where we get a lot of our extension, a lot of our training, and a lot of our CU knowledge from. And with Indiana alone, I have to hold 3 licenses for our company to operate. And so our general license is a 7A. So that's going to be a manager's license. And then every technician below that operates under a registered technician. And we have our different testing for it. And then our CEUs is dependent on the category. So in Indiana, I hold a 7A, a 7B, which is the special license for termites, and then a category 8, which is mosquito. And they all vary on what we're allowed to do. And if we wanted to do lawn care, that's a different license. If we wanted to do tree care, that's a different license. If we wanted to do aerial applications, whole another license, understandable, and just covers the whole gambit of every separate category has a license. They even talked years ago about putting bedbug under a separate license. I think that didn't happen. That would just be a whole other thing of licensing and testing. And we have our training guides that gets put out by Purdue for the state of Indiana, and then we have to go test for them. One thing that changes state to state is going to be reciprocity and requirements. So in Indiana, if you have an Indiana license, you can treat in Illinois without having with an RT license, as long as somebody else has an Illinois license. But Indiana is different than the rest of the states near us. You could go out as a person off the street, buy the training guide, take the 7A test, and pass it, then go get your business license for the taxation purposes, and you're allowed to go out and treat. And you are fully, there's no education requirement, there's no experience requirement. But when you look at your termite license, you have to be operating under somebody for a period of time, and you have to have a 2-day course at Purdue to do that. And I mentioned the state chemist, that's our regulatory body. They are the ones who are going to show up and inspect our offices, inspect our trucks, and in chemical rooms, and go into any complaint and do the research. Our inspectors are based off of regions. And what we've noticed now is a lot of our inspectors are former cops. So they really like their sting operation. So we'll end up with people just pulling up unmarked cars on termite jobs. We used to have to report all of our jobs that were over a certain dollar amount, usually $10,000 or more for termite. And we had to report that. And even any kind of termite treatment had to be reported in like 24 hours. And so we were focused a lot on, them being there. So we'd always just assume they would be on site. And they also do almost sting operations on restaurants, something like that, where if they find out a restaurant is treating on their own and the products aren't being, divulged, they will, sneak in, things like that. And our laws are worded in Indiana. It's vague enough to where they say if you have bleach under your counter, they technically can enter your home and check on it. And little anecdote here, the laws got so severe because another company on the other end of our state, still the south, but in the south east, actually fist fought an inspector in our state, and they ended up losing their licenses. They had other legal ramifications, but their wives were able to go get licensed, and the husbands just did the work under the wives' license. So we have a law on the books now that basically says you can't fight your state inspector, and you have to let them have access. And that just became where they can get access to anything. More political drama for Indiana. Lobbyists passed a law or had a law passed in Indiana, and it changed everything to where now Indiana as a state cannot be more rigid than the federal law. So our drift law just changed in Indiana, where we basically have next to no drift law, and we had 7 chemicals that were banned in Indiana that now are open. They're going through that now, And so that's all of our laws changing. So our laws constantly can get pushed back and forth depending on who's technically, what gets passed, who's in charge of what. And we're going to see how that goes because they're still working on it 2, 3 years later from the initial fallout of everything changing. So now the state chemist can't lobby certain fines. The legislature has to approve that. And if anything happens now that is too large, it goes straight to the EPA. And we don't even have an EPA branch down near us, so it goes straight to Chicago, which is in Illinois. And speaking of Illinois, Illinois is under the Department of Public Health. And for our portion of Illinois, it's mainly small rural towns. Whereas in Indiana, we get a lot more metro factories, things like that. Oh, wait, sorry, I forgot to mention. Oh, wait, that's it, sorry. Their laws mostly dictated by Chicago. Everything runs out of Chicago, which is in the north of Illinois. So everything in the south just kind of goes along with it. And just for an anecdote here, they actually have legislation going in Illinois right now to have the bottom portion of Illinois break off from Illinois and maybe join Indiana as a different changing the states and making one larger and one smaller. So we'll see how that goes. They have committees back and forth, and so the whole map of the U.S. might change in the next couple of years. So how it works with Indiana and Illinois, I have to hold an Illinois license, but my technicians under me can operate in Illinois as long as I keep my license current. They simple kind of test, able to drive in Illinois, take it. Not too hard. Had harder tests. Um, Overall, not a bad area. They're like I said, public health, which I like. I like the fact that they're under public health because I would rather as an industry operate under a public health banner than an ag banner or a miscellaneous like state chemist banner. Because I've stated that I feel like, especially in the U.S., we have an issue of being viewed. I don't want to say in a negative light, but not in the light we should. A lot of it's just a guy in a truck rolls up. He sprays. I don't know if you guys are familiar with King of the Hill, that old cartoon that was in America, Dale Gribble, where the kind of guy he just seems like a guy just treating and not really having a scientific background to it. But we have as an industry, you guys as well. I've seen you guys have great training best practices and all that stuff. It looked great. I went through a bunch of it. Your bed bug. I even dove into your guys's billboard things for rodents, which I think is a great thing. I hated seeing rodents just dying on the boards. We might actually start seeing some of that here because we do have some changes in laws coming, which I'll get into. The impact of other states on the rest of us. But yeah, not much goes on in Illinois. Got a couple things we treat out there, but nothing too fun. Our biggest problem with Illinois right now is marijuana is legal in Illinois. We have employees in Illinois. It's illegal in Indiana. So we're going back and forth with the different state laws of, how we view our drug testing and how we view our insurance claims and everything like that. Like I said, it's 50 different critters in a trench coat, acting as one. Then we move on to Kentucky, which is under the Department of Agriculture, and everything operates under training wise out of University of Kentucky, which is a great school. I did undergrad with one of the guys who's now a professor over there, so that's always been fun. So we got all the fun, and now they have different categories as well, more in line with Indiana in terms of how things. But their basic entry level license is a 7A, which if you talk to anybody who operates in Indiana, 7A is the higher license. And so it goes back and forth with having to keep track of all that. And they have been streamlining their stuff and then gotten rid of some licenses. And they're now going into online testing, which is nice. But what stands out about them is their requirements for a license. So unlike Indiana, you can't just roll in and take a test and get a license. You need 2 years of experience with a licensed petrol company. So you have to work under somebody, or you have to have a degree in entomology and certain credit hours. They put that in place, and they argue that's either quality of treatment, and it helps keep outside companies from rolling in and just starting up and running out little guys. which is nice, but in some states this can be an issue. But like I said, these guys are Department of Agriculture, and so what happens here, and we see this a lot in the U.S., is agriculture takes the first stage. They, even with chemical manufacturers in the U.S., they develop the products for ag first, and then the PCOs become a second thought. And we even see this with some of our product marketing to us is they'll even say, hey, this was developed for the PCOs first. We didn't go to ag first. We went to the PCOs. Because what happens here with the US is all the testing and the licensing and the committees they have to go through with the EPA just makes it harder for these companies to develop it for the smaller PCO market when the agriculture market is so large. The agriculture market even ends up kind of biting us too is we lose products and we have more laws put on us because of issues with misuse of farmers and everything like that. And one problem we're seeing in the US, which I'll get into at the next day, is all of our products we can get are now available to homeowners. So you can go online and buy any product that we use straight from websites, Amazon. In fact, I was just out last week at a Rural King, which is like a farm store here. The best way to describe it is I can go in, I can buy jeans, clothes, boots, chicken feed, chickens, horse medicine, and then guns and ammo all in the same place. And then you can go into their pesticide section, and they had Demon, which is a product we use here. And you can get basically the same products I can buy from my distributor right at Rural King. So that's just a problem we have is it's available to the homeowner. And so you're seeing a lot of PCOs in the US who are being like, hey, we need to limit this, which we might actually get to happen, which I'll talk about the impact of other states soon. But first, I want to jump into Florida, which I don't operate in, mainly because distance is on the other side of the state, and I don't qualify. So even with my background, I couldn't start up in Florida without working under somebody else for a year. And so they have different laws, different critters, all impacts it. They get a lot of invasive species down there. So they actually have bounties on pythons and boas and things like that get released into there, which makes for great TV. If you guys ever just want to watch on social media or YouTube, these people going out there and just catching these snakes and things. But so they have all these different requirements, and I don't do wildlife mainly because they don't let me out that much. But what stands about Florida though is they have a registry of persons requiring prior notification of pesticide. So every little flag marker you see on that map is a different location where you're required to notify that person if you're going to treat within a certain distance of their home. So they can go to a doctor. The doctor can say, okay, you have a pesticide allergy. And then any PCO or a lawn care company, anything like that, operating in that area that is going to treat either next door or if it's more severe allergy within so many tenths of a mile, has to tell that person they're going to treat. And in Florida, that's a constant thing. They're operating basically year round, and they are there. Can't really see it on this one too well, but my family has a home near Tampa. You guys are familiar with that area, the Tampa Bay area, Buccaneers for the football team that plays there. I'm sorry, American football. There's about 6 or 7 people just around my parents' neighborhood that are on the registry that have to be told, which at this point I would think it's a little tedious because when we're down there, there's constantly it's being done outside treatments, home treatments. Then there's dozens of companies, which we get a lot of that. Even in my area, with the metro population, I told you guys, we have between 25 to 30 companies operating just out of my city alone that do work from regionals to nationals to 1 to 2 man operations are all operating here. Like I mentioned before, the impacts of other states, and if I'm going too fast, just let me know. I'm trying to get through the kind of bland stuff to get into the little bit more interesting stuff. Impacts of other states. So the first state all the way to the left is California, and I mentioned them first because they actually are going to have the greatest impact. They're a huge market for manufacturers here. And when their laws get passed, they usually have a trickle down effect where we see other states that are in mind with them, like Illinois, which is in the middle there, and then New York. Um, so I can see them doing this next. California just banned first and second generation rodenticides in their state. So there goes all of our anticoagulants, almost in the same mindset of what you guys have done with your glue board usage. Is they're deeming it not humane because of how the rodents die from them, and they're also worried about secondary poisoning and everything like that. And so it just went into effect this January, and we're going to see the impact. It can go a couple different ways. Whereas the other states will pick up laws for it too, or the manufacturers will be like, we're going to start making less of this because we don't have that market anymore. Can't remember the trade name off my head, but we're actually seeing more of a birth control type bait being used, which takes a slightly a little bit longer, but it's a birth control for the rodents and stopping the everything else that. It looks like little sausages. So if you guys start seeing that, that's gonna be a new one. Um, which personally, I think with this happening, we're going to start seeing more of a domino effect with our pesticide usage here and what we're allowed to have. Um, so I could see biopesticides taking a bigger stance soon. And we do practice our IPM here, and we try to use that. Um, but one impact we're definitely seeing is a generational turnover. A lot of our older clients, a lot of our farmer clients don't want change. This is how it's been done. I want this. And once or twice a year, I get somebody telling me they still have chloridane, which has been banned in the US for quite some time, like in their garage or in their barns. And they'll just turn it over to me when they find it. Or, grandpa passes away. And so uh, uh, they're stuck with, dealing with all these pesticides. And the like state chemist or the Department of Ag doesn't have the best marketing or PR to let everybody know when toxic away days are. So we end up with a bunch of this stuff. I have a shelf in my office of just old, retired chemical, um, just waiting to go out for tox away, or just museum pieces now. I also have some products that were put out that just didn't make it. So it's a nice little thought spot there. I had the old pump sprayers people used to use. Um, but with the rodenticide changes, California, we're probably going to see that roll through. And what we're worried about is a change in how everything is viewed from general use to restricted use. So as it stands right now for Indiana, our registered technicians cannot use certain restricted use things like Zenprox, but our 7As can. So if rodenticides go restricted use, then we won't be able to send our general technicians out to put out rodenticides. So one thing we're kind of hoping for, which would be easier on us, but we don't see the states doing it because government just being difficult, is just changing the classifications of our chemical. What I would love to see is everything that is general use now that we use under a license to become restricted use category 1, and then everything that is category uh, everything that's now in category 2. And so I just saw this rodenticide transfer. They're doing studies on that. It looks like they're affecting it mostly on. This is asking about the rodenticide transfer in the ecosystem, how to affect on fertility of other mammals. The studies are focusing on that. Right now, they're doing really well on just affecting the rodents themselves. I can grab some of the studies on that for you guys soon. I actually went to a talk last January at Purdue where they went through all of the birth control effects. So I'll be able to grab that for you guys soon and explain that. But so far, they haven't had a huge non-target effect. They're really zeroing in on the hormones in the rodents for that. So that's probably the way it's going to go for rodenticides in the U.S. in the next probably 10 years is the focus on birth control, which the impact of that is going to be speed, which we're worried about. But depending on what manufacturer you ask and what rep you ask at this point, some aren't as worried with our last election because the EPA is going to change. But then you ask some other ones, they're more worried because who got selected for Secretary of Health, which they're changing things in our dyes and our foods. It's not a huge leap to go from what's in our foods to what pesticides and rodenticides are used. So we're a bit up in the air, and that kind of happens to us every 4 or 8 years of how we treat our business cycle and how we view our regulations. So depending on what part, you guys have that too, depending on what party takes power, we change how we view things or what product we're going to be able to use or how we do everything. We were real worried about demand product label changing as well because of some states banning it. Not banning it, but changing how things were doing. Because a lot of things over here is people do full yard treatments, which I don't agree with on a lot of stances. As an entomologist, I don't think we need to treat the yards for a lot of pests. But it's a common thing here is just full yard treatments. So that might get impacted on. We had years ago a change in our pyrethrin label usage because operators were basically power spraying homes up and down from top to bottom on the exterior, and they had to dial that back down and change it to eaves and 3 foot up and 3 foot out and chemicals. And one thing we've seen is individual cities are changing how we're allowed to do things. A couple of the cities in Illinois have actually banned backpack blowers, big LUV foggers and things like that are banned in those cities for mosquito wool. Now we have to change that where we can't, treat certain ways of that, which isn't too bad for drift flaws. As a company here, we have a policy. We don't treat anything flowering. Pollinator protection is a big thing in the US right now. They're all pushing for, which should have been on the books from the beginning. And so, flowering products, even weeds that are found in the yard, we don't treat. We're also seeing where they're finally taking some of our past laws more seriously. So that we have now are endangered or native species that they're worried about, registries that change how we can treat, how farmers can treat. And so depending on where you live and the pests of note, or even the insects of note, I don't want to say pests, the wildlife of note changes when you can treat, how you can treat, or if you can treat at all. So we have some counties, thankfully none near us right now, that we really have to focus on, where they're focused on the rusted bumblebee, where you can't treat in certain, acreage or something like that. And north of here, along our Wabash River, they're really worried about a native mussel, and so that stops certain farmers from putting out certain things because of the runoff risk. And so they're pushing that more in this area right now. But so we're going to see a big change in the next 5-10 years as the trickle down effect from California and Illinois and New York and other states, and even the Virginias and Carolinas are changing things. And usually it follows the dollar amount. So if they can't operate something, a company can't operate here and something changes, they allow in other states and products. One thing we're trying to do here is jump on the biopesticide train early. So I've been doing a lot of research on nematodes, beneficial nematodes, and usage of that, and how we're doing things, and more of our monitors and traps, and cultural practices and habitat manipulation. So some of the first things we do when we're going into a site now is, telling them if we change this product or we change, or sorry, what we're doing, or we change the habitat, don't put out mulch in front of your house, Ms. Johnson, or you need a dehumidifier in your basement. We see a lot of overlap with US PCOs of doing a lot of everything. So we have some companies that will do crawl space remediation, where they'll end up taking it and encapsulating it with plastic on the inside and putting a sub pump in and dehumidifiers in and changing that. And they'll do, so your pest guy could be your crawl space guy, he can be your exclusion guy, he can be your power washing guy. We have a new company here who's doing basically almost everything under the sun. So we'll see how it goes for them. But then going to the next part here, I kind of want to highlight some differences and things between your guys' BCA and our MPMA. So going through all your guys' BCA or PBCA stuff, I really love what you guys have out there because it looks a lot more user friendly in my opinion, and just more active with the everyday PTO. When I was going through like your bedbug stuff, I loved it because I was able to focus on things. When you go to the MPMA's bedbug best practice, it's a 50 page document, And that's my biggest problem with a lot of stuff we get in the US is just big and bloated. And like our Truman book is huge. Amount, yeah, I'm sure you guys have Truman amounts there too, but they're just huge, big things. And it was really nice to be able to go to your guys' stuff and just be able to focus on what I actually wanted to read and not have to cut through everything else. Like I said, it's over here it's 50 different critters in a trench coat, trying to do the same thing. And but our MPMA honestly kind of works like a lobbying group. Well, they do have education materials and webinars and all that kind of stuff. Um, an everyday technician can go their whole career without ever touching an MPMA event or product. Um, like their big thing is Pest World, and I've been out of college 15 years. Well, first out of college 15 years, but in the industry for years. I've only gone to nationals 2 or 3 times, and one of the times is because it was in Hawaii, and it was just a good trip. Um, Whereas all of our kind of stuff comes from the local level. So when we want to go for education stuff, we won't usually go through the MPMA. So we have like in Indiana the IPMA, the Indiana Pest Management, or we have the KPMA, Kentucky Pest Management Association, or the Illinois version, or the Tennessee version. So it's state groups, and they're partnered really well with the state regulatory group. So they have to have it all approved by them for each state. So when I do educational talks, I have to put together a presentation like this, send it off to uh, the person in charge of the day that day. They send it off to each individual state to get CEU approval. So if we were wanting credit hours for Indiana, Kentucky, Illinois, Tennessee, or whatever, we have to get approval from each state, and then each state has to then approve, and they all have different uh, oh, sorry, I'm reading first, and then it has to prove it, and we have to go through that. And they each have their different regulations and things they want to approve and not approve, and stipulations and everything like they do. And then we have stewards here, which your CRRU is. Okay, so yeah, we all have a lot of our study group progressions that do all the genetic research. A lot of our research groups come either from two folds: public sector or private sector. So a lot of it is university based here. So you have your Purdue's, your Florida, Texas A&M, and then you have your chemical companies that are doing the research too. Um, and how it usually goes is the chemical company is putting together a product, and they seek out a university to do research in the product for them. And so they'll do all the genetic testings, the resistance testings, and lab testings for them. And then the chemical company will go out and say, we did these, this test out of Purdue shows, what we can have and how good our product is and everything. Um, and so they're focusing a lot on that. So from like a regulatory, like government agency, the EPA kind of puts that on the burden of proof and everything on the manufacturer. So they have to jump through so many different hoops and then take the research they've had done and their testing that they've done in house. They take that to the EPA. The EPA will then go through it all and say, hey, you got to do this again, or you have to go back, or we approve it. And that's a multi-year process. And then they're left with the waiting the red tape portion, in which even then, once they even submit everything, it can take time and years to get it approved and licensed. A lot of it is done through burden of proof on the manufacturer, and they partner with the university. So a lot of grad students end up doing that kind of testing with product lines. So it's fun for them. Which I didn't do a lot of that in my graduate year or years there. I was more of a uh, directly related to the PCO operations, so the how. So I didn't have to do a lot with the manufacturing or the testing of that. Which is not to say we haven't done in-house testing here of products, but yeah, a lot of that for progression of dent resistance and bait resistance is done at the university level. And so PCOs here basically towed beta version and to mix our baits, things like that when we're working with our roaches and stuff. And then one other thing about the NPMA, which I'm actually on the NPMA's technical committee, which is fun, which that's about to end for me, I think, this month. Uh, it's a committee that basically tries to bridge the gap between universities and like PhDs and the BCEs and all that stuff down to like a tech level. And one thing we're working on here, which I think is going to be big, is proper photography of insects. So I know you guys probably get them from your clients. You end up getting a blurry picture of an insect and like, hey, what is this? And so they're working on a user-friendly guide for the PCOs and for clients on how to properly take pictures of insects and make it easier. And it's a training tools and everything like that. But like I said, a lot of our training tools come from each university. So like when I'm doing research for a topic, one of the things I actually end up doing is I go straight to extension sites. You had some great stuff. Pennsylvania or Penn State has some great stuff. Virginia has some great stuff, and it gives you all the breakdown. And that's where a lot of our educational stuff comes from. So if you're not getting your in-house training for whatever company you're from in the U.S., you're kind of left to go to extension uh, services and their web-based stuff. Now, I wanted to also point out some of the pests we're dealing with over here. And so I'm only going to take three so I can get into some other stuff here. I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. We'll focus on these three real quick. The first one here on the left is the brown recluse. Sometimes gets called the fiddleback spider or the violin spider because of that nice kind of fiddle shape on his cephalothorax. Now, this guy, I'm not going to do the Latin because I'm terrible with Latin. I'll give you a brief rundown of him. We can identify him not just because of the physical characteristics that we see at the violin or fiddle shape. Also, if you want to get real close to him, look at his eyes. So he's got three pairs of eyes, so the 6 eyes only. About 3/8 of an inch long, 3/16, 10 legs, bulbous abdomen. Um, and we're actually right in the middle of their season right now. Also, because of our weather being weird this year, we're actually right in the middle of termite season too, so it's fun. But yeah, so we're getting all of our eggs laid in May to July, and they're laying about 50 eggs at a time. Spiralings will about a month, and they love humid environments. So we're going to see these guys a lot in our basements, attics, crawl spaces, closets. We catch a lot of these on blue boards. They're going to live for about 2 years, and the males are going to actively seek out the female. So oddly, in a morbid kind of way, we tell our clients how to, if you're looking at the glue board, because they get curious, we tell them if you're seeing females out, that's a good thing because the females are coming out looking for food and the population is going down for food wise or, pest wise. And when they look at the pedipalps, I'm sure you guys are aware, you can identify them by the pedipalps, males, big bulbous pedipalps, females, thin dainty pedipalps. So they check them all out. They deal with all that kind of fun stuff with them. Yeah, they can result in bodily harm. We've had one death in our area that we can attribute straight to brown recluse. A man went out camping. A brown recluse got into his sleeping bag. He got bit on the foot. He let it go. If he would have gotten treatment, he would have been fine, but he let it go. It got into his system, and the dying tissue got in his system, and sadly he passed away. Which this next slide is going to show you some of the damage. So it's not too bad, at least I don't think. But if you guys got kind of a weaker stomach, I apologize. These two bottom pictures are leg bites. So the poison causes necroses. It's a pretty deep, painful wound. I haven't been bit by these guys yet. It'll probably happen one of these days, especially since my own parents' house has brown recluse. We treat, but they come back in. It's a good environment for them. So it happens. So what we have to do over here is we always have to shake out our winter clothing or our work boots. I have my yard boots I keep in my garage. Every time I put them on, they always get taken over, shaken out, all that stuff. But here we have the bottom pictures here to the bite wounds. It's also something you can Google more and see more of the bite stuff if you ever want to see something kind of sick or anything like that. I had a professor in college, Dr. York or Dr. Turpin. Their son-in-law got bit in the stomach, so he has a nice divot in his stomach where he lost all that tissue there. Most people do fine; it heals up. So about 6 to 8 hours, if you get bit, you'll start seeing a black mark, bite mark, and it can spread. A lot of times, infected bites or infected wounds with staph will get attributed to a brown recluse bite, and so they get a worse rep than they actually have. You know, they don't bite all that often. They show up and they have a stigma to them. I mean, I'm not going to cuddle them and be like, hey, they're great, but we got there's worse critters out there. And how we're controlling them, blue boards for monitoring, so we can figure out the populations where they're at and treat their spray runs, wettable powders, slow release formations, dusting cracks and crevices and voids, so wall voids, foam related formulations to that. So it's a fun little critter we got there. All right, so I'm starting to see this question real quick, Davina. Do you have legislation like the Prevention of Damage by Pest Acts where the responsibility rests with the landowner occupier who's legally required to abate the infestation? Uh, what is compliance like? Do people spend the money on pest control until the infestation is eradicated? So basically, how that works is it's kind of viewed as not my monkey, not my circus for a lot of government stuff here. Uh, Uh, and unless your problem is impacting somebody else, they leave you to yourself unless somehow like outfit services is called, or social services is called, or adult protection services, or you live in like an apartment or duplex situation. So like if you're in a suburb, it's going to take a while before your pest problem affects your neighbors. So we see it more in cases. I'll use bed bugs as an example. Um, I'll go ahead and jump the gun here for some anecdote stories that are coming up. Um, I'm very young into my entomology career. I get a call from our city, our Department of Health, because the mayor of our city wants to shut down a polite way of saying this, very seedy by the hour hotel. It was lower income and it was also kind of, other things were going on there. But some kids were living there and there was a big bed bug infestation at this place. And the mayor wanted to shut down the uh, hotel motel distinction there, because of the problems there. So my very young 22, 23-year-old self had to walk in front of everybody. The mayor wasn't there, just the Department of Health ahead. And be like, that'd be the dumbest thing you can do because you'll just spread them. But they basically said, hey, if you don't get this under control at this hotel, to the hotel owner, we're gonna have to start fining you. And they asked me how much I thought it would cost. I'm like, you're looking at 1,000 plus, and this was early, 2011, 2012 dollars. Back when everyone in the U.S. was really, big on bed bugs. Speaking of another little story, we had footage of us that was called our most extreme infestation for bed bugs at the time. That got picked up by Animal Planet for one of their shows, and they got picked up again by a TV production company in London. Some of you guys a long time ago may have seen some of our bee footage, but that footage now isn't even in our top 15, top 20 of infestations that we've seen. Which if I had more time, I would go into more bedbug stuff over here because it's super fun for us. But so regulatory wise and like license wise, unless you're a like restaurant or an apartment or something like that, there's no real like enforcement of like you have to do this unless like children are involved. Like I said, even being on the state in the U.S. or restaurants and stuff like that aren't forced to have a PCO. So as long as you're showing some treatment on your own in some states, you're fine to do it. So like you don't have to call in a professional to treat, and they can get away with having their own treatments in house and just doing it like that. But and it is best practice here to have a PCO doing it. We have plenty of commercial kitchens we work in, things like that. Which I'll highlight a hodgepodge of those in a minute. Yeah, so if you're like just an everyday homeowner, you're fully allowed to just do it yourself and not have to worry about any kind of regulation there. Even in a lot of cases of apartments here, uh, where it takes a long time for us to be like, hey, the problem is the tenant because they're hoarding or because they're not cleaning or they're not letting us in before the apartment associate management can even do anything for that tenant. Where like they have to have a whole step process of eviction, they have to have a whole this. But in terms of like you have to take care of your pets, like even yards here. We don't have a lot. Like I live in a county area, so not directly into a city. And so our laws are even more laxed, where you don't even have to mow your yard to a certain extent. Like it has to be like a high level, long term thing. Which I live. There's a good ton of houses behind me, but it's not a suburb. Uh, 6 houses down is a house. They only mow their yard probably once a month, even in our wettest time or biggest growth section. I mean, personally, as an entomologist, I think it's great because I'm like, pollinators, look at the bees. Then I have other neighbors who have perfectly manicured, HOA style lawns where the guy's out there every day, mowing it and fertilizing it and doing everything. So it's a mix there. But yeah, no, we don't have any set like, you have this unless children are involved, like I said, or it's a commercial entity. But yeah, I mean, I'd love it if we did kind of have that thing where it has to be done, but they do let it be, you can take care of yourself or, your own kind of focus. But yeah, even then, we don't see a hard focus on you have to get it done until it's the next little critter we got black widows. I know you guys got those false widows here, but we get the black widows. We find these a lot in our landscape rocks and things like that. My parents' house next door to them, their neighbor's house, we found about 20 and 20 minutes in all of his landscape pavers. Uh, Again, I'm not going to do the Latin because I'm terrible at it. But, I do a lot of talks with children and I go there, bring them my roaches, my spiders and stuff. I say, hey, when you see red on a spider, you should do what your parents do when they're driving. Stop. Because if this guy bites you, uh, it's going to lock up your muscle system. So we'll get to that. There we go. Uh, Vomiting, nausea, cramping, 1 to 3 hour mark. And usually it's in about 12 to 24 hours. And deaths are super rare, but children 130 pounds are the most significant risk. Life cycle for these guys, egg sacs, 255 eggs, produce your lifetime. Eggs will emerge in 26 to 30 days. You know, Stigmatized because of they can hurt us, but not that bad. I mean, we get them all the time. I usually get them brought to me and I keep them in my office. I don't have. Hold on, I'm gonna check these live. Nope. I apologize. My black widow passed away. Uh, but yeah, I keep them in our office. We get them brought in as pets all the time. People here are a little weird, even non-PCO people keep them as pets. Each their own. Control, a lot of the way of the other one. We're kind of mostly focused on the exterior on this case. We don't usually see them inside homes. We usually see, if we do see them in an interior section, it's barns, sheds, and outbuildings. So with more of our rural clients still these guys, or people who are heavily into their landscape when their house is surrounded by fields and trees. I want to pop into our eastern subterranean termite. I know you guys don't have really a lot of that to do with. I know sometimes they pop up for you. I read once they established once and didn't show up. We do a lot of termites. We have a whole division of just termites for us. So we have technicians who their whole life is just termites. Termite inspections, termite treatments, termite renewals, which is a great little money thing for us. Termite renewals. So we get our treatment in, and then every year the client pays a fee, and it comes with an inspection, and we retreat if need be, or retreat if they disturb the soil. But yeah, so you got the primary queen here. We got the whole life cycle of everything for them. We got different caste systems, soldiers, workers, reproductives. And we're right in the heart of swarm season right now. So I'm getting a ton of blurry photos asking if this is a reproductive ant or this is a reproductive termite. Usually 2 or 3 times a day. I'm going through that and saying, hey, this is this, or, we're looking for this on that. And everyone's like, hey, it's an ant. Because they don't want to spend the money on termites. Because the estimate here is, now, when you do the research on this, it's a vague number and they don't know where it came from. So it ranges from $1 to $7 billion in damage from termites a year. So it's a big moneymaker here in the US. And it changes depending on your region, what termite you're dealing with. But we just basically have eastern sub. So you don't see a lot of like the tenting and fumigation for these guys because they're in the soil. And what we're looking for out here is things like mud tubes. So we're going to be in the crawl space, basement or cellar, and we're just going to notice these mud tubes taking up the block because they got to keep that environment. They got to stay moist. And they're just searching for the cellulose material, the wood, and making their way up. And these guys can be fun. We expect them to be closer to the ground, but we've seen them be up high. We actually one talk I went to, I can't remember if it was Kentucky or Purdue. They actually had them in a parking garage on the top floor, and they just made their way up mud tube wise, found a source of cellulose up there. We can find them getting into things like baseball bats, bowling pins, blue board backing, paintings. So we can find them in all kinds of areas, all kind of fun. We have our, oh, here's the one. Have I ever been bitten by a spider? Yeah. So this is like I mentioned before, and sorry, I see the questions and go back and forth. So and sorry for the tangents. This kind of happens with my life. I haven't been bitten by a spider. So when I was about best story I got for you. I was about 14. We had just moved into a new home. I started living into the basement, and we had a bunch of leaf litter around the basement walls. There is a walkout basement. And we removed all the leaf litter, and we had tons and tons of yellow sac spiders come into my room. And they're not always going to bite. They're not a problem of health, but they were making their way through everything. So I was noticing little bites on my arms because I was basically rolling over on them in my sleep. And then one day I'm laying in my bed, I look up where the ceiling meets the wall. There's just tons of them hanging out, probably about 30 of them, just hanging out there. But yeah, we removed the leaf litter. They popped up, changed the environment. So we had our fun with that. But yeah, I get bit. I've had to feed bed bugs. Thankfully, I don't do that anymore. We have an actual bed bug dog handler, feeds them now. But yeah, we'll get into the crazy stuff that I end up doing just for fun. That's one of them. Feeding the insects, handling and stuff like that. On or in. Termite damage wise, real quick again, sir. So we're looking at that damage there, tunnels there, eating away at the wood, and then we're treating for them. So what we have to do is if we're doing a preventative perimeter treatment, we are trenching and rotting the soil. So everywhere you see yellow here, that's going to be where we can just straight do that. If we have concrete, we got to drill on the chemical we're using. The drill spots are anywhere from I believe 12 now, 18. And it all depends on when it was treated, where you're going to see drill marks at, and on the chemical. So we have to just inspect for previous treatment. But when this is all said and done, we have a nice soil barrier around everything. Now, there are termite monitors. I don't use those here. I don't recommend them. People love them, though. I don't because you can termite can go right between them and get to the house and not touch the monitors. I'd rather have a preventative barrier. And then we have things like pre-construction. So everywhere in here is going to get in the block, or between the blocks is going to get treated. And then the soil outside that, and then final grade will get treated. So all our building practices like that. We're seeing some changes in treatment or policies right now for, okay. Sorry, I said that 3 months up, so we're going to skip all that. Interesting sites real quick. So I got the University of Evansville, which is sister college of Paxton. Real quick with that, they had bad setup with their drainage for their landscape. So everything went under a building. The stuff there didn't work. So I was stuck treating for mosquitoes under a building in some utility tunnels. Here is Messer Park Zoo, and that is Amazonia on the left. And everything we do there is dependent on the vets. So we have to do a lot of exotic species treatments and specialized treatment, and then non-chemical removal. So that hornet's nest, you said it's a bald-faced hornet's nest. It's a yellow jacket. I had to do a live removal of that. They told me it was about the size of an American football, so yay big. No, it was the size of my chest cavity. So long story short, I did a live removal on that, getting stung about 50 times, and ended up getting hosed down with a water hose to keep everything off me. And then here we go, Holiday World. So my job is a lot of under, in, or on. And we treat this place. It's a giant amusement park, 150 acres, water park, free sodas everywhere. It's a yellow jackets are a problem. Also, we deal with a lot of flying insects. So on the left here is the Liberty Launch, which is a raising up tower type thing. So at the very top there, I'm not in this picture, but I had a treat for paper wasps that nested there. On the right here is the Legend roller coaster. It had wasps up there too, and sadly, one of my guys got to do it, not me. So we had to climb up there, all the way up there, and treat. So yeah, I've been treating 150 feet up in the air, 100 feet up in the air, under stuff. But yeah, thank you. I want to thank these two that had to deal with all my questions and getting this all going. And thank you all for having me. If you have any questions, just let me know.
No, thank you for coming on. No, it was really cool. And it's nice to see the changes as well, as we're going through a lot of qualification changes as well in the UK. So it's nice to see like what other countries are doing and stuff. And obviously we've spoken at great length around the licensing in the US and stuff previously as well. Um, I think you've managed to catch all of the questions as they're coming in actually. So I don't think we have any questions at the moment. But I do just want to say like thanks again for coming on. I know it was a really early start for you. And yeah, and you got lots of people saying thank you and stuff as well. So yeah, no, appreciate you. Thank you very much.
And I see this here about termites. If you have any questions about termites ever, I actually have a whole nother thing already set up for termites, and that's a whole big thing. Like I said, it's another license. So yeah, if anyone ever has questions about termites, just uh, send me an email or hit that link or the QR code in the beginning. But yeah, termites are fun. It's a whole big thing. Whole careers in life are just around termites these days.
No, excellent. Yeah, no, we'll maybe we'll get you on just to sort of talk termites for a bit as well, and that I think would appreciate that. I know I would, obviously, because I'm going for my ace, so I'll absolutely use that some cheeky training in there as well. So, yeah, no, thank you again, and yeah, we'll catch up again soon. Cheers, up, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Wonderful. Yeah. So I think if John is available, we have one question for the recommended setting on the B&G Gunver Garden ants, if he doesn't mind just popping on and explaining that quickly. And then I'm going to hand you over to Rosina.
Yeah, it really depends on what bait you're using, really, because that'll give you the dosage on the actual label. So it'll vary between the different ant baits that you get. So read the label.
Have have you got a tip for people weighing it out? So if they're using their own, so they obviously, because you like you said, it changes through consistencies and stuff. I guess also you have to be aware some if it gets warmer, they're going to be slightly runnier as well. Is there a way that you can recommend people like test weighting the settings and stuff to make it easier?
Could put it onto a set of scales on a bait station and then tare it. So do the tare on it and then apply your bait to it and see how much that'll be. But generally, the first setting is 25 grams, and then it gets bigger as you go along. On the actual bait gun itself, with the instructions, it gives you the different settings and how much bait will come out per dose. So yeah, that'll give you a good indication as to what it should be.
Cool, amazing. Thanks again for jumping on, John. And again, thanks to Pelsis for sponsoring the World Pest Day Forum.
No problem.
So wonderful. So I am going to hand over to Rosina Robson. She is our new Chief Executive. So if Rosina could come and join us, and I will let her take over and give you some industry news and updates.
Thank you so much, Niall. Brilliant. I'm here to wrap up. So, as Niall said, I'm Rosina Robson, the new Chief Executive of the British Pest Control Association. So it's been fantastic to be here today on World Pest Day, the day we celebrate the vital role pest professionals play in protecting public health, food safety, and the environment. So we're using this week to highlight the amazing work of frontline pest professionals across our social media channels. So if you see any of our posts pop up on your feed, please do like, comment, or share to help amplify the message. That would be brilliant. A huge thank you to everyone who's joined us today for this special World Pest Day edition of our digital forum. We've had brilliant attendees and expert speakers joining us from across the globe of different time zones. So a special thanks to our speakers for their time and insight. David Priddy from Sundew in Australia, Stephen Seen from Seen Pest Control here in the UK, John Stewart from Pelsis, our sponsors today, we're very grateful, and Brandon Runyon just now from the Swat Pest Management in the USA. So thank you so much to you all. It's been a fantastic session. A few updates before we wrap up. I've got a few quick updates from the association and across the sector. We've just wrapped up our member elections for 6 seats on the BPCA executive board. So the BPCA is run by members, for members, and it's only right that the members get to choose who represents them. And the votes are in. And I'm delighted to confirm the newly elected directors are drum roll, Peter Bowers-Davis from Integrum Services, Jason Cholerton from CSS Pest Services, Adrian Goff from Pest Risk Management Group, Alan Morris from Envu, Carolian van der Worm from 360 Wildlife Control, and Christopher Venables from Venables Pest Control. So congratulations to our new board members, and I really look forward to working with you all closely. So serving on the board is no small task. So please do take a moment to congratulate and thank them for volunteering their time to help steer the future of the organisation. On qualifications, the staff team has been working very hard to pull together a new qualification development working group who will be tasked with designing the new suite of level 3 qualifications as part of the BPCA qualifications framework. So we're partnering with the Royal Society for Public Health to develop robust, progressive and respected qualifications that align pest management with other professional sectors. So initially we'll be launching level 3 qualifications for general pest management, bird management and wildlife management. And so these are just the beginning. Our long-term goal is a full qualifications framework that supports every stage of a pest controller's career, from entry level right through to specialist roles. So better qualifications means a better image for our industry, and that helps us protect your toolkit, raise our reputation, and bring new talent into the sector. So if you're passionate about professional standards and want to join a working group shaping these qualifications, then please get in touch with the team at training@bpca.org.uk. Just a word on Birmingham and the recent bin strikes. You may have spotted our recent pest awareness campaign in and around Birmingham during the recent bin strikes. We ran billboard and press ads to make sure homeowners and business owners had clear advice on pest prevention and knew where to find a BPCA member if they needed help. It's just one example of how BPCA champions your work and puts professional pest management in the public eye. On glue board licensing in England, we've written an open letter to the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Steve Reed, raising serious concerns about the failings of the glue trap licensing system in England. And our freedom of information requests show the Met Police have had no briefings or training on the new legislation, and our members continue to report widespread misuse by the public. So we're calling for urgent action, including banning glue trap sales to the general public, better enforcement of existing laws, and improvements to the professional licensing system. So we've yet to receive a response from DEFRA or Mr. Reed, but we'll absolutely keep members updated as soon as we hear more. On special interest groups, if you're particularly passionate about rodents or insects, now is the perfect time to get involved. We've just launched 2 new special interest groups, Rodent-Wise and Bug-Wise, and they're open to members and non-members alike. So they're a great way to help shape best practice, network with like-minded professionals, and work with key stakeholders on sector-wide issues. We also have groups for fumigation, bee management, and bird and wildlife control. So to get involved, head to bpca.org.uk/groups or email technical@bpca.org.uk. Right, I hope you got all of that. So that's it from me for today. Thank you so much again to our speakers, sponsors, and everyone who joined us, wherever in the world you're tuning in from. We'll be in Birmingham for a BPCA social event on the 19th of June, and our next online event will be a member-only webinar on the 2nd of July with Alex Wade, exploring insecticide formulations and application techniques. So I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of World Pest Day. Thank you.